You think pirates always roamed under sunny skies and tropical winds? Think again, because some of the most treacherous voyages weren't in the Caribbean. They were in the Arctic winds off Nova Scotia, the ice-choked waters of the North Sea, and the frigid Atlantic routes where death crept in with the cold. And no, they didn't stay warm by drinking rum. That's a myth. This is the real story of how pirates battled frostbite, frozen ropes, and hypothermia, and the brutal, almost unthinkable ways they stayed warm, from animal guts to human body heat, from burning their own gear to even stranger things. So grab a coat, because this won't be a cozy tale. This is about fire, survival, and the twisted genius of desperate men. And don't forget to subscribe, or we'll leave you in the cold. The cold didn't just chill their bones, it turned survival into a nightmare. The sails froze solid. The rigging, once rope, became brittle like iron cords. Touching metal with bare hands meant skin torn off like wet paper. Even the cannonballs froze together. And the deck, slippery with ice and seawater. Every step was a death sentence. Below deck wasn't better. No insulation, no heating, just dozens of freezing bodies packed together, breathing steam into the dark. Frostbite was constant. Toes turned black, fingers snapped from infection, lips cracked, eyes wept ice. Pirates, those so-called kings of the sea, reduced to coughing, shaking, and praying for sunrise. There were fights, brawls over scraps of dry cloth, over whose blanket was warmer, over who got to sleep near the lantern. And the worst part? Water. Every barrel froze, so they drank slush, chewed snow, melted frost off the inside of the hull with their mouths. You've heard of sea madness? This was cold madness. And it changed them. When you're surrounded by ice, fire becomes more than warmth. It becomes life. But wood was precious, and pirate ships didn't carry extra firewood, so they burned what they had. Ropes, spare sails, crates, even the wood from their own bunks. One log could mean another night of survival, so pirates ripped their own ship apart, piece by piece. First the barrels, then floorboards, even the doors to the captain's quarters. And when the wood ran out, they got creative. And a little disturbing. Old boots made of leather into the fire. Dead rats, cooked for both food and flame. One record even tells of pirates boiling pitch and lighting it in skulls to warm the room. That's not a legend, that's desperation. They burned their own belongings. One pirate set his diary ablaze, his only record of home. Another lit the bones of a fallen crewman. He muttered, "Better warm than holy." Madness? Maybe, but in frozen seas, the fire was sacred, even if it came at a brutal cost. When the fire died, and there was nothing left to burn, the only heat they had left was each other. Pirates, hardened men who'd kill over gold, were now huddling together like frightened animals, skin to skin, back to chest, one body warming another. Some wrapped themselves in sails and curled up like wolves. Others shared hammocks, 2, sometimes 3 in one. In frozen waters, pride died quickly. All that mattered was warmth. It wasn't just about sleeping close. They developed routines. Heat watches. Pirates rotated in and out of body piles so no one froze alone. One man would sleep between 2 others like insulation, then swap out when someone else got too cold. They even built heat pits and the hollowed out storage spaces below deck lined with wet rags and scraps of sailcloth just big enough for 2 men to press together. And they whispered stories. Stories of warmth, of beaches, of the sun on their faces again. It wasn't just a survival tactic. It was the only comfort they had left. This wasn't rum-soaked brotherhood. This was biology, desperation, and raw human will. No matter how many fires they lit, no matter how close they huddled, some pirates didn't survive. The cold crept in through cracked hulls and frozen breath. It found the weakest first, the old, the sick, the ones already worn down by sea life. And when they died, the cold didn't stop. Their bodies didn't rot, they froze, stiff like statues, flesh pale, lips blue, eyes frozen open. At first, the crew tried to bury them at sea, wrapped them in sailcloth, whispered words, and slid them into the icy water. But soon, they stopped. The water was too cold, too dangerous, and losing weight from the ship's balance made things worse, so they started stacking the bodies. Below deck, in empty crates, even tied to the masts. They called it sailing with ghosts. Every morning, the crew walked past their frozen brothers, silent, unmoving, a reminder of what came next. One man even carved a name into the deck next to his frozen friend. "He's still with us," he said, "just colder now." This wasn't death with dignity, it was cold death. death, frozen, forgotten, and left behind on the sea, but the ship sailed on. On the 43rd day, the wind returned. It started as a breeze, just enough to flutter what remained of their ragged sails. The ice cracked, the sea stirred, the horizon shifted, and with it, so did the crew. Thin, frostbitten, barely alive, they rose. They hoisted what was left of their ship's pride, a torn flag, a shattered mast, and prayers carried in silence. Some never spoke again, others left the sea behind forever, but they had survived the cold, not with rum, not with luck, but with fire, flesh, and unbreakable will. They'd burned their ship, slept in piles, held the dead like they were still warm. They had become something else, not just pirates, but living myths. And the ocean, it let them live this time. So when you hear stories of treasure, of cannon fire, and mutiny, remember this: sometimes the greatest battle wasn't with the Navy, but with the cold. And sometimes the only thing keeping a pirate alive was another pirate's heartbeat.